I've been in a little bit of a mani rut lately, and I've had the hardest time figuring out what was going to be my next mani. So I really kind of had to take a step back and realize maybe I was just overcomplicating things and overthinking things, which is pretty normal for me. But sometimes less is more. I don't always have to go crazy with some kind of nail art or anything like that. So in today's video, I'm going to do a pretty simple mani with just a little bit of a vertical ombre because I really wanted to go back to a little bit of basics because sometimes less is more. So if you want to see my process for doing this mani and a little bit of a vertical ombre, stick around and I'll show you how I do it. If you were mesmerized by the colors of my mani, same. These two dip powders are from ManiBoss dip powder, so they are newer colors. They're called Sage Advice, which is a beautiful shimmer, and Out of Time, which is the glitter. So ManiBoss had just started Friday deals. So every Friday she has a new curated set, which is on deal for that day. And so for this particular Friday, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, she actually created these two new colors for the Friday deal. So that really helped kick off getting out of my mani rut, is just having the colors paired and chosen for me. And I am so glad I used these because they are just gorgeous. I am an ambassador for ManiBoss, so these colors were sent to me, but I would never share something with you that I didn't love. Or if I shared it with you and I didn't love it, I would share that with you because you're always going to get my honest opinions. So for today's mani, I'll also be using the ManiBoss dip liquids. And I do also want to mention I do have an ambassador code. If you order from ManiBoss, you can use code GENIE to save 10% off your order. I'm going to be starting with Sage Advice, which is a beautiful sage green shimmer, and I'm pretty sure this shimmer can be chromed because you can kind of see the sheen with it, so I may have to try that next because I love when you can chrome shimmers. They're just so beautiful. So Sage Advice is going to go on my index finger and thumb as whole nails, and then it's going to be half of the ombre on my middle finger. So really right now I'm going to focus on my index finger and my thumb because those are going to be full dips. So I applied a thin, even layer of dip base to my entire nail, and now I'm going to go ahead and dip into Sage Advice. I want to tap off the excess powder, and I don't know if you can sort of see right now the way I have my hand, that shimmer that's on my skin. That tells me that I think this can be chromed. So I'm just taking my precision tool and I'm cleaning up around my cuticle area, making sure I don't have any product on my skin. And what you saw me kind of picking at is I am trying out a new peel base. So this is the Cirque Colors peel base. It's an air dry peel base. And I got a little bit excess on my skin because the brush is a lot wider than I'm used to. So it's not really product, so like dip liquid or anything that I have on my skin. It's just really excess peel base that I'm kind of peeling away. What I really love about the ManiBoss dip powders is they're always really great coverage and they're super easy to use. I never really find myself struggling to use these dip powders, which of course I appreciate. And then as far as the dip base, I think it's got like at least for me, the perfect dry time. I'd consider it about a medium dry time. So it doesn't dry so fast to where I have to kind of rush. Like I can take my time and make sure I've got even coverage on my nail and I still have enough time to dip before it dries on me. And then by the time I'm done with my dipping, I don't have to wait around and wait for the dip liquid to dry. You can see I finished my index finger and my thumb and I'm already dusting off the excess powder without disrupting the dip base. So it's dried soon enough to where I can dust off when I'm ready because I hate having to wait to dust off my excess powder and move on to my next mani. And by the way, look at the coverage on this. This is the coverage I'm talking about. This is one dip and I've got full coverage already. But of course, per my normal process, I am going to do 2 layers. How many layers of dip powder you do really depends on what you're going for. Are you going for longevity or are you just going to pop off the mani afterwards? Are you looking for more opacity? There's a lot of factors that kind of play into how many layers you do. So I'd say if you on your natural nails, you weren't wearing peel base, you were looking for a long lasting mani, you may want to do additional layers more than 2 because you do want a little bit of thickness, because if your dip powder layers are too thin, they could crack. So you do want them to be a little bit thicker. Now for me, I am wearing peel base underneath, so I'll probably pop this mani off within a day or two if it lasts that long. I mean, I wish I could wear this longer, but I do have more content to film. So I do 2 layers just for a little bit more thickness because I don't like my nails too thin, but I don't have to worry about longevity and cracking. So that's why I don't do more than that. And of course, I will cap them in clear as well. So it's really 3 total layers that I do. And I think with this color, I don't necessarily have to cap in clear, but I always like to just, I'm paranoid. Like I don't want to do all that work and then file and buff through the color, make it look a little patchy. So I like to protect all my colors with clear, regardless of whether they're solids or glitters. And if you want to see a video on how I dip on my natural nails without peel base, how I do it for longevity, I'll leave that video up above in the cards because I did do that for a couple of trips that I did this summer. Now I'm going to move on to Out of Thyme, and thyme is spelled like the herb, so Thyme. So I love a good pun, so I love that she named it this. So this is such a beautiful glitter, but I will say the texture of this glitter is very different. And you may have worked with other dip powders with this texture, but I'd say it's a little bit wetter, which makes it a little bit heavier. And if you've worked with dip powders like that before, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't make it difficult to work with. So I dipped in and full coverage, amazing coverage, 1 coat coverage. I probably didn't need a second layer. And I would say though, you probably don't want to pour over for this because it's so heavy. They just kind of like fall in like clumps rather than kind of cascading, if that makes sense at all. So I would recommend for powders like these with these texture, you either dip in or you lay your finger in it rather than pouring over. So where I had, and I wouldn't say it was difficult, but where I had a little bit of challenge with this glitter, I'll say, even though I don't think challenge may be even too strong of a word, is when I got into the ombre, which I'll kind of explain that a little bit more once I get into the ombre. now moving on to my ombre, it does work a little bit quicker because I am using dip liquids and not gel. So I always want to make sure that I'm setting everything up, lining everything up, ready to go so that I can move quickly once I have the dip base on my nail. So I've got my two colors and I do put the jars in the order that I'm going to use them because I have a bad habit of putting the wrong color on the wrong side. And I will be using eyeshadow brushes. These are both Wet n Wild eyeshadow brushes that I get off of Amazon, and I'm going to use them to do the tap method ombre. So I'm just applying my dip base to my entire nail, and then I'm going to be starting out with Sage Advice. So I always like to start with my solid, but in this case a shimmer because I don't have any solids, and it's going to be on the side of my nail closest to my index finger, which has Sage Advice. So it's kind of like it's spilling over from my index finger onto my middle finger. So I'm just tapping on the powder, so I'm dipping my brush into the powder, I'm tapping it onto the nail. I want the majority of it near that sidewall and just kind of fade into the center of my nail. And then I'm going to go into Out of Time, dip my eyeshadow brush in that, and then tap that onto the rest of my nail, onto that wet dip base. And the little bit of challenge here is because Out of Time is a bit of a heavier glitter, because it's a little bit wetter, it kind of just fell instead of cascaded, which for the first layer wasn't as big of a deal because I already had half my nail covered in Sage Advice, so it was really just covering up the rest of my nail with that glitter. So it didn't really matter where the powder fell because it would just, as long as it covered the wet dip base, I was good. But for the second layer, when I do an ombre, I like to switch up the order of the colors, and that kind of helps with a more seamless transition rather than like a stark line transition. But I start with Out of Time, but because it's so heavy, it kind of just like fell down in like a clump rather than kind of cascading and fading. So it was a little more heavy on the glitter. So I actually didn't go as far as I wanted to over towards the middle of my nail, but I'll show you once I do my Sage Advice, dust off the excess powder, realize that I didn't have as much glitter as I wanted. I'll show you how I fix that a little bit because I wanted it to be a little more even of half and half rather than like 3/4 of my nail being Sage Advice and just the remaining quarter of it being that glitter. And you'll notice that I do tap off the excess powder onto my lint-free wipe rather than on top of my jar because I do have that little bit of loose glitter on the first half of my nail, and I don't want to contaminate my jar with those glitters. So I went ahead and put away my jars because I like to clean up as I go, and I started to dust off the excess powder, and then I realized I didn't have enough glitter, that it wasn't even amount for me. So I brought out my jar of Out of Time again, but I want to be really careful because I don't want to overcompensate in the other direction and have too much glitter. So I'm just applying a very light amount of dip base to about half to 3/4 of my nail. I'm not going to do my entire nail, and then I'm just going to try to take just a little bit of that glitter and very lightly tap just to around kind of like the middle of my nail, just to make sure that I don't have too much glitter. And then so I'm just going to tap it down, make sure everything's laying flat, and then I'm happy with that coverage. So now that all my nails are done, I'm going to go ahead and cap everything in clear using my ManiBoss clear. So once I've got everything capped in clear, I'm going to make sure I scrub off the excess dust with a stiff scrub brush, activate, file, and buff off camera, and then I'll be back for top coat. Alright, so here's how the mani's looking after a quick file and buff. So now I'm going to get into my dip top coat. In order for my dip top coat to dry, I do need a final layer of activator. So I'm going to apply one final thin layer of activator to all my nails, and then I'm going to wait a full 2 minutes before I go in with my dip top coat, and that gives my activator plenty of time to dry. As always, I'm going to finish up by rehydrating my cuticles, and they are looking especially crusty after this mani, so I'm using my scales of Mermaid Cuticle Balm. This is in the scent Just Growing with the Flow. And when I'm feeling especially dry, I like the balms better than using the oils. I just feel like they are even more hydrating. And here we are with the finished look. What do you think? Aren't these colors just so gorgeous? And I love the way they pair together. So thank you, ManiBoss, for putting together this set, because it took the guesswork out of creating this mani, especially when I was in such a rut. I initially thought I would save these colors for Thanksgiving, but they were kind of calling to me, so I'm definitely glad I just went ahead and used them. And I think, I was just overthinking the mani. Like, sometimes you don't have to get complicated with a mani and go crazy with nail art. Sometimes it's nice just to do something a little more simple. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. It lets me know to continue creating content like this, and it also helps YouTube recommend me to others, which helps grow my channel. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I upload content every Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.